Okay, thank you everyone for coming. We got a great crowd here, and we're gonna have a good conversation. Everybody knows who Jose is. And I'm Leslie. Thanks for coming. Now, Jose, I guess just to start out, for anyone who hasn't read the book and hasn't been that familiar with Jose's story, tell us a little bit about how you got here in the first place when you were 12 years old.
I'll do this really brief because she has a lot of great questions that I'm looking forward to. So I'll just say this briefly. So I was born in the Philippines. Any Filipino in the room? Yay! So I born in the Philippines, and then I woke up one morning and my suitcase was packed, and my mother said I was going to America and that she would follow. So then I went to the airport, got on the plane, landed in Los Angeles at LAX 1993, and thought I was in the wrong country, because I thought America was Baywatch and Oprah and Michael Jackson and Whitney Houston. I didn't realize that America was people who looked like me and that there were like all these Latin people. I didn't know what that was. The only thing I knew about the world was the Miss Universe pageant. You remember when you watched in the Philippines, my mother was obsessed with the Oscars and the Miss Universe pageant, and so we would watch every year, and that's how I got to know Paraguay and Uruguay, Ecuador, right? But that was like, I can name the capitals of these countries because of the freaking Miss Universe pageant. So I thought America was this whole other thing, and then I got here, I thought I was in the wrong country. So from the very beginning, arriving as a 12-year-old in 1993, race was like probably the source of a lot of confusion for me and fascination. Like in the book, I write about the day the O.J. Simpson trial was announced. The verdict, and how my teacher stopped the class, Mrs. Wakefield, listened to the verdict on the radio, and the white kids reacted one way, the black kids reacted another way, and the Asians and Latinos looked at each other going like, which side do we go? I would argue that we've been stuck with that question ever since. But 2 years after the O.J. Simpson trial, the verdict, I found out that I was here illegally when I went to the DMV to get a driver's permit. That's how I found out that the papers that my grandfather gave me was fake. The green card was fake. And this was in 1997, so there was no Google, there was no social media, there was no hashtagging anything. And the moment the woman at the DMV said that the green card was fake, in my head, all I could think of was, I'm not Mexican, which is awful. But I thought that because that's what the newspaper said. Like whenever anything about illegal, fake, border, immigration, wall, whenever that issue came up, the news, radio, television, newspaper, always meant it as a Mexican thing. And I'm not Mexican, and I thought maybe because my name is Jose, the woman at the DMV thought I was Mexican. But I didn't correct her. I just rode my bike home. I was listening to Alanis Morissette and Boyz II Men on my Walkman. Do you know what that is? I don't know. So then I got home, confronted my grandfather, who was a naturalized U.S. citizen, and he said two things. What are you doing showing that to people, the green card? The second thing, hindi ka pwede dito, which means you're not supposed to be here. So that's how I found out. And again, this was in 1997, so I thought I was the only non-Mexican illegal alien in America. My grandfather, the plan was, he smuggled me here because he couldn't bring me legally. And I would marry a woman who was a U.S. citizen. And until that happened, I would work at the flea market in San Jose, close to where we were living, and work as a janitor. So that was his plan. So the only way I could resist his plan was that at the same time that I found that I was undocumented, I also had realized that I was gay. So the only way of claiming any sort of independence was telling him, I'm not marrying a woman, I'm gay. So you don't say that to like a Catholic Filipino grandfather. So that's when this life kind of began. And the book is structured, I structured the book lying, passing, and hiding, because ever since I was 16, I'm now 37, so that's a long ass time. Everything I've had to do in this country to survive and thrive, I don't consider myself, it's funny, people consider me successful, I don't consider myself successful. But however that happened, all I did was lie, pass, and hide.
Which brings us to the next question. And it involves your grandfather, actually, because as you mentioned, yes, your grandfather had a certain American dream for you, right? And it was like, he was just going to bring you here. You would just work under the table jobs because that's just what
That's
you
what
do.
we do.
Yes, that's what we do, and until you could marry and get legal, as he put it, You didn't want to do that. You didn't want to do that, and at that point, you began meeting many friends and mentors at school who would help you just move along, move forward, but you arrived at this one critical moment. You were at the San Francisco Chronicle.
Yeah, I was trying to get a job right out of high school.
Exactly. You were filling out a job application, and you were presented with a list of questions, all of which required you to say was either you're a citizen, either you're a legal resident, or you're somehow legally allowed to work, or the fourth choice, which is go home. Which you didn't take. So ultimately, what happened? And after you tell that story, the follow-up is, you do ask readers, what would you have done? Tell us what you did and what went through your mind.
Yeah, so, right out of high school, ever since I found that I was here illegally and that everyone in my family, my grandparents and my mother conspired to do this, I just resented them. I just didn't understand why they didn't think it through. I didn't understand why they thought I was gonna buy into what they wanted, which is I would lie and that I would work at the flea market and I would live a life in which I'm here but I'm not really here, right? So right out of high school, I'm like, I'm out of this house. So thankfully I met a woman, Teresa Moore, who was helping me out, and she had worked at the Chronicle. She was, I think, the only black woman at the Chronicle at the time. And she said, hey, they have this job, you answer the phones, you deliver faxes. Do you know what that is? Faxes. So you deliver the faxes, you answer the phone, you deliver mail, you're a copy boy. I think it's like $10 an hour, which was like a lot of money to me. It was like 3 Starbucks at the time, maybe 4. I was like, yo, this is good money. But then I had, for the first time, had to fill out a form, because at that point, I had never worked like a real job, right? So the form was pretty black and white in that way. It was very clear that if you lie, it says you are committing this thing called perjury. There was no iPhone then, so I couldn't really look up what perjury was on the spot, but I knew that it sounded bad. But it was either I check the box and get a job and make money and be independent, or I don't have a job. So I checked the box, fully knowing that it was no longer my grandfather lying, it was me continuing and deepening the lie. And of course, at that time, you're in a profession where you're supposed to tell the truth as much as you can tell it, and you're lying about yourself. So, but yeah, that time in the book, that's the first time, one of only 2 times in the book, that I actually directly addressed the reader. Like, what would you have done? Would you have checked the box? Would you have not checked the box? And then as I got older and older, because at that time I was 19, I didn't realize until I started researching my own life how bad that was. That the biggest offense you could make, immigration-wise, is to claim to be a U.S. citizen when you are not. So that's why the moment I decided to come out as undocumented, all the lawyers I spoke to said, the moment you admit this in the New York Times, in black and white, we cannot help you. And one lawyer, actually, she was really the one that helped me make a decision. Because the moment she said, here's the thing, Mr. Vargas, you weren't supposed to make it this far. The moment she said that, it became very clear to me that I had to do it. That I had to basically blow the whistle and say, I have been lying. These are all the lies. This is all the fraud. This is all of it. Now what? The question I asked people when I came out as undocumented 7 years ago and started Define American, which I know you'll check out when you get home, defineamerican.com. Oh yeah, I think we're going to have like the text message thing here. Is how do we talk about this issue with honesty? Like, so we're in LA, right? So 800,000 undocumented people of all different backgrounds. When are we actually going to realize the fact that if it weren't for undocumented labor, I'm not sure how many households in this whole area could survive? Like, who are the people taking care of your kids? Who are the people mowing your lawns and serving you drinks? Who are the people making sure that you have tomatoes and cabbage, for your salads? Who's making sure that you have the cheap labor that you can't live without? Like, when are we going to tell the truth about that? Why is it that we say that people like me are committing a crime? Well, what about the people that knowingly hire us? What are they committing? Are we all into some conspiracy that we just don't want to talk about? And why is it that this issue is always just about Mexican, when the reality is undocumented Koreans, undocumented Chinese, undocumented Filipinos are actually the fastest growing people? Are we so racist that we can't acknowledge the fact that they're actually undocumented black people? Is that too much for people to understand, that you can be undocumented and black? Like, why? And why, Starbucks is the place where I meet undocumented white people. They just approach me at Starbucks and they come out and say, hey, I'm undocumented. Sometimes they try to pay for the coffee and I'm like, I can pay for the coffee. It's fine. And usually they're either German, French, or Canadian. And I'm like, okay, Define American, we actually have this coming out campaign. So when you're ready to come out to your community and help complicate what people think of this issue, please contact us. And I'm realizing now, out of, I don't know how many people, only 3 people have taken me up on that.
Well, tell us. I mean, about coming out, right? It's been 7 years.
Yeah.
As you say, you talked to lawyers about this. I kind of want to go back a little bit. One lawyer said you shouldn't have gotten this far. And you got that far. You got to the Washington Post. You got to be part of a team that won a Pulitzer, right? And all this time, you're hiding and you're lying and you're hiding and you're lying. What does that do to your head? What did it do to your head to where you finally said enough?
So that's really what the book is about, because I didn't know what it did to my head. I thought, what is that line from Hamilton? Immigrants, we get it done. We get the job done, right? Oh my God, I'm misquoting Hamilton. I'm sorry, Lin-Manuel. Don't tell Lin-Manuel I misquoted it. Right? And so I thought, the moment I found out when I was 16, I'm just going to get the job done. I'm going to work really, really hard. I'm going to earn this citizenship that American citizens take for granted every day, right? And I'm so going to busy myself with work that I'm not even going to think about how I feel or how messed up this whole thing is and how I'm just so angry all the time because I'm looking at all the hypocrisies and kind of all the nonsensical policies out there. And then I have to say to myself, do the American people really even know what's happening in their name? Do they know? So the book for me is grappling with that, like grappling with the cost of hiding not only from the government, but hiding from the people who I have become friends with. Like, I talk about this in the book, like part of the difficulty for me was like, I'm only gonna let you in, like, so much, like my friend said, I think that's one of the chapters, distant intimacy. You're really good at distant intimacy, Jose. Like, like you go in, I let you in, and then I'm like, okay. I didn't realize that all the talk of the walls that we build, I didn't realize that you can actually create emotional walls against people and that you just don't want them to know anything. Like all of my 20s, when I started working professionally, I never talked about my family. Whenever anybody asks, why aren't you going home for Thanksgiving? Oh, and thankfully I'm in a profession where I ask the questions. I don't answer them. So I'm really good at deflecting. I'm like, oh, but how are you? Where are you going for Thanksgiving? So I would like turn it around. I'm learning in this book tour how really hard it is to ask me questions. Because I'm just like all over the place. And you're going like, okay, Jose, I asked you a question, you're not answering me. I'm completely aware that I'm doing this, by the way. But I'm fighting. It was a long time. It was 14 years of doing this. So I'm like learning to like let it go and be like, just answer the question, Jose, and like, let it go.
So speaking of answering, one other thing. So when you did come out, I mean, part of it was because you couldn't take it anymore. But you also, I think, from I remember reading back then, you were hoping to change the narrative about who is an undocumented immigrant. Did you? Have you?
Well, to be honest, I was kind of waiting for like an undocumented pilot to come out. I was waiting for like I was waiting because I cannot be the only person who quote unquote made it this far. I cannot be. There has to be some scientist, some chemist, some judge, maybe even. I don't know. But from the very beginning, telling stories is all I know, right? I write, I make documentary films. Like that's what I know how to do. So I've kind of just taken my skills and what I've learned and adapted it to this. So at Define American, a big part of our job, so we're in LA, so let's talk about Hollywood, right? As a gay man, I remember what it was like to see Will and Grace as the #1 show on television. I remember what it was like to watch Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, the first version. I remember what it was like whenever you watch a movie, there was always going to be a gay best friend. And they started being the gay white male best friend from My Best Friend's Wedding. The moment I wake up before I put on my makeup, you know that scene? That, right? It started being a gay white guy, and then it became Latino, then it became Asian, and then I'm still getting whiplash about where we are with trans issues, and grateful that trans women of color like Laverne Cox and Janet Mock and Gita Lucero, right? What they've done with that. So that has been a cultural narrative shift in understanding that LGBT people are human beings who want the same thing you want. So how do we take that and apply that to immigrants in this country, documented or undocumented? Because look, the Trump administration doesn't care about the difference, right? So they just don't want any more immigrants. So how do we then help Hollywood figure out how to tell more accurate, more complex stories of immigrants? So at Define American, the part of our work that is really exciting and groundbreaking is we are now known in Hollywood as the organization that you go to when you want to write a storyline or a character about anyone who's an immigrant or an undocumented immigrant. And so that's really groundbreaking. So we've consulted on like 40 projects, both scripted, unscripted, both film and movies, and we'll be doing more and more.
Define American also worked on the documentary titled White People.
Yes, because I love white people.
Right, which sprang out of, yes, it sprang out of some stories you did a long, long time ago, right, about what is it like to be white.
I mean,
Tell me about that, yeah.
It really goes back to the O.J. Simpson verdict, right? Like I didn't know what white was. And if you're not from here, you have this kind of distance from it. Kind of like, okay, what is going on? Why do they think they're the default? Why are they the center all the time? Why is it that they don't have to be explained? Like, while all of us have to be explained. Like, what is that about? So it started there, really. And then when I was a reporter at the Chronicle, I found out that the Bay Area, where I'm from, was the first minority-majority region in America. And so I wrote a story about what it's like to be white in a high school where you're the only one of 13 kids. So I found a high school in San Jose where all the white kids played water polo and hung around in room D12. And the woman, her name was Justine Steele with the E at the end. And she hated the fact that all of the Mexican, Filipino, Vietnamese students just called her white girl. So that was my lead. The other students call her white girl. And I'll never forget fighting with my white editors about that because they thought it was too provocative. And I said to the editor, all of whom are white, I said to him, actually, my byline is Jose Antonio Vargas, so I think it's okay. Like, meaning I'm not sure I could have written that story if I was a white journalist. I don't think white people would have let me written that story. They would have been like, okay, no. So that was always been my fascination. And of course, the construction of white leads us to the conversation about then why was black created? And why is it when all those European immigrants, before there was any border patrol or visas or green cards, why is it that when they came here, I'm a huge fan of Toni Morrison, who's a big part of the book. And Toni Morrison said that one of the earliest things that any new immigrant learns when they came to America was the N-word. Right? Because hey, you may be German, you may be Latvian, you may be Irish, right? And so meaning you came from all these different cultures. So what bonded you together? It bonded you together to say what you were and what you were not. So you were not that. And I'm saying this too because I'm thinking back now to where we are. How many Latino and Asian immigrants, when they get here, learn to reject blackness to embrace whiteness? Like, what is that about? Right?
They bring it with them.
They bring it with them. Because there's this kind of inherent narrative in America that white is American. And this collective panic attack that I would argue white people are experiencing without even knowing what it is. And I think that's the thing. We have to figure out what it is. Like, I was recently with some group of friends, all of them are people of color, and we were having a conversation about how do we engage with white people without making them feel like we're just reacting. Like, because, to me right now, an exciting thing that's happening is that I think white people from all parts of the country, because I've been everywhere, I think they actually want to learn. They actually want to know what they don't know. But too often what happens is people of color are like, yo, like, I'm not going to carry this burden. Like, you can do this on your own. You don't need my help. I don't know if that's sustainable, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know how I talk about white privilege to poor working class people in Arkansas. I don't know how I talk about my own sense of displacement or my own sense of invalidation of this country if I can't or I refuse to see working class people of all backgrounds, including white people, who feel invalidated and unseen by this country. And that's why they voted for Donald Trump.
So we're talking about racial narratives. There's some other narratives kind of within unauthorized immigrants, which is the good immigrant versus bad immigrant narrative. We saw a lot of this last year when Congress was talking about a possible legislative solution to people who now have DACA. Tell me about what this narrative is and what does Define American do around this narrative?
Well, first of all, I think it's incredibly insidious. I think it was created without realizing how limiting that is even, right? Like when I came out as undocumented, I could handle what the right says. Like the people who you go on Twitter right now, they're like, why is he here? Go back to Mexico. So I can handle all of that. I can handle, I covered Sarah Palin in 2008. I can handle that. What I was totally unprepared for was the left or people in the immigrant rights movement because I had no training for it. I didn't know this kind of oppression Olympics that we put people through. I didn't know that I actually have to show you that I have a heart or where I'm pained to let you understand that I may have more money, I may have more access, but I've been separated from my mother for 25 years and that fucking sucks, right? And I don't know that I have to prove, oh my God, I'm sorry, I just cussed. I don't know why is it that I have to prove my own existence and humanity with the very people who's fighting for the same thing that I'm fighting for. So that I grappled with that in the book. One of the hardest things to write about in the book was after I came out as undocumented. I think it was right after the Time magazine cover, because we ended up putting people on the cover of Time magazine. I was at some rally and there's this undocumented day laborer who's been doing this work for decades. And he said to me, you can't represent us, you're too successful. And then I said to him, I don't think he heard me. I said, well, I can only represent myself. I actually founded Define American because we're fighting. I don't think he wanted to hear any of that. And then he goes, you're not even Mexican. And when I was writing it, how do I make sure that I'm understanding where his pain is coming from? Because look, his pain is, wait a second, this mofo lied to get jobs. Now he comes out, he's in the cover of Time magazine, he's squatting on our movement, and he's done nothing. And people like me, because I have an accent, because I couldn't make it past community college, he tried, he said. So how do I make sure that I'm understanding why he feels that way? While at the same time, trying to tell him, or trying, because he didn't really want to listen to me in that way, was that I don't consider myself successful. That I don't want to perpetuate some good immigrant model minority myth that is out there about Asian people. It's so dangerous to me, all of that. It's so dangerous because, for example, it doesn't recognize the reality that actually within the Asian community actually has the widest gap in income. Right? People don't know that. They just want to know that we're the most educated, most affluent group of people, and that, one of my friends was like, well, you guys are not even white people. You're better than white people. I'm like, we are? And of course, the difference with Asian people is at least Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Venezuelans, and Mexicans have a shared language with different accents, but with a shared language. What do Asian people have in common other than noodles and rice? Koreans, Vietnamese, Japanese, Filipinos, first of all, they're all fighting each other. So at least Latinos actually, or Latinx people have a sense of a collective identity. There's Univision, there's soccer, right? Asian people, you know, I think the only collective identity is that ethnic food now means Asian food, and all the foodies out there who just discovered balut are like, yo, it's been there forever, right? It's like the only thing that's sexy and accessible and hippie are the food, our food, right? Which is like, okay, can you like, you know, give us some papers before you enjoy these amazing ethnic cuisine? Can we do that?
But what do you say to those, and this has to be a really tough one to grapple with, and to those who say, you know, my dad got deported last year,
Yeah.
my brother got deported. You know what? If I were you, you know, I would have gotten deported by now. It's been 7 years. What do you say to them? And by the way, why haven't you gotten deported?
I have no idea.
Okay.
You know, in the book, I actually called ICE, right? I called ICE because I came out in June 2011. I was prepared for everything to happen. I paid my credit card bills because I didn't want to owe money to credit cards, right? That's how much I've like totally internalized this whole good immigrant thing in my head. I paid the credit cards off. It was June. I figured by October, the government will contact me. At that point, I'd done Colbert, I'd done Bill O'Reilly, I'd been everywhere, whatever, right? Then nothing happened. So by November, I called the editor of Time magazine, and I'm like, hey, Rick, that was Rick Stengel was his name. I knew him because, you know, journalism is very small in that kind of world. So I called him and I said, Rick, I want to write a follow-up story about why they haven't deported me yet. And he was like, what? Yes. So I wrote a story. And, you know, when you write a story, I had to call ICE myself. So I'll save that for the book. You'll see it in the book. But I don't understand that. And so actually for me, probably the biggest part of the depression is hearing from so many people who have just lost people. And yet I think this is the fattest I've been since high school. I just like ate it all away. I think I've just like, I got into this like really depressed, really, it's like I'm just carrying all these stories and I can't hold them. Thankfully we have Define Americans, so that's where the stories go. But when they get personal, you know, when someone texts me or DMs me on Twitter, you know, here's the Skype of the funeral of my dad that I couldn't go to, right? And then what's the conversation? Immigration reform.
That's a whole other one.
That's a whole, meaning.
That's a whole other one. Yeah, I mean, okay, two questions on that one really is, you know, your book, I mean, you know, and the story that you've been telling us, you know, versions of for like the past 7 years deals with life in the shadows as an undocumented immigrant. But however, as we all know, the recent political landscape has changed. We're not just talking about illegal versus legal now. I mean, for the first time since I began covering immigration a long time ago, we're talking about moves to limit legal immigration in the country. These are the same programs that allowed your grandparents to come here, right? Your grandfather came through a sister. It takes roughly, about 23 years right now to come through a sibling from the Philippines?
That's why my mom is waiting. I think 3 more years left.
3 more, she's been waiting for 20. Something like that. So now that system, this administration really wants to cut down. Definitely they want to eliminate the sibling category, which is what got your family here.
This is why there's so many Asian people in America today, is precisely because of this.
Right. Well, where is this all headed? I mean, do you see at any time in the even distant future any kind of immigration reform?
We can't talk about immigration reform until we ask some really fundamental questions, which are, what do we want this country to be? Who do we want to welcome in this country? And when are we going to face our own history? Those are 3 fundamental questions. So when Bill O'Reilly, who's like my favorite cranky uncle, when he says, my great-great-grandparents did it the right way. Which right way? Right? Was there a border patrol that I didn't know about after the potato famine in Ireland? Like, was there? So meaning though, and then I'm asking myself, who told him that? Like, have history books so whitewashed the history of migration in this country that we actually don't know the difference between the Chinese Exclusion Act and how it impacted migration patterns versus, you know, what happened to the Irish and the Italians and the Germans?
Yeah, I mean, before Chinese exclusion, it was pretty easy to just show up, pretty much.
You just showed up.
You just showed up. It really was like that. And we didn't really start constructing these laws to keep people out.
And you can't separate immigration from race And you can't separate it from citizenship. The first time this country established who could be a U.S. citizen was in the late 1700s after quote-unquote independence. And the law said that the only people who could be U.S. citizens were white people of good moral character. We did not legally allow Native Americans to be U.S. citizens until 1924. You know, some people would argue, including Alicia Garza, one of the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, says to me that, you know, the Black Lives Matter movement is actually about citizenship. Not citizenship papers, but citizenship as dignity. In the book, I wrote about this man who contacted me right after Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. And was like, hey, Jose, I know you're not a citizen, man, but I'm a citizen. But it's not all cracked up to be. Look at how Puerto Ricans are being treated right now. So you can't separate, and all of these issues are far bigger than any immigration reform, bigger than any DACA or any DREAM Act that we're talking about. So I think for us at Define American, we can't pass these laws and talk about these policies until we actually know what the conversation is and what narratives have we built around these conversations.
But there are different ones, and it depends on who you ask, because there are going to be people who say, no, this is a white European-founded country, and this is what American identity is, whereas in Los Angeles,
and I would tell them, I'm sorry, the Filipinos have been here since the 1700s. We taught people in New Orleans how to fish, right? What are you going to tell to the Mexican people? All of this history about this was a European-founded country. Founded by whom? Defined by what? This was never your country.
So this is what you call the master narrative.
Well,
book,
Toni
right?
Morrison gave me that. That was her language, right?
All right, let's talk about the master narrative and what that is.
So the chapter in the book that my lawyers didn't read because I didn't want them to read. This is a chapter where I admitted to the laws I had to break. And then from a narrative perspective in the book, I was asking, how do I explain why I broke these laws? Because there's no going around that. I broke the law. How do I explain that? How do I justify that? And so the only way I could do it was thinking about what The Bluest Eye did to me. So The Bluest Eye, which is this amazing, I hope people here have read it, Toni Morrison's first novel. And I read it in 8th grade because I'm from Mountain View, California, and that's what happened. Mr. Zahner assigned it as reading, and I read it, was totally confused by it. The book is about this young black girl who wanted to have blue eyes. And she believed that for her to be worthy, she needed blue eyes. And so I was so obsessed with this book, again, not knowing anything and trying to understand black and white binary. I mean, I know colorism. I'm from a colonized country. I know what that is. But I didn't know black and white as an actual construction. So when I was researching the book, I went to the library and, of course, read everything because I'm a nerd. And in one article, Toni Morrison said that she wrote the book to tell people, to show people what happens when you surrender to the master narrative. And it meant the master narrative that being black and not having blue eyes is not worthy. And she said that in the book, she wanted a character who was a complete victim. So victimized, so unwanted by everybody that she had swallowed up what people said. And she said, I'm gonna want blue eyes. So I took that and I'm like, wait a second. Well, I don't want to be this illegal person. I don't want to be this faggot that people call. So I'm going to create my own narrative. And then what Morrison and then James Baldwin and then Ralph Ellison and then all these black writers that I got to read as early as freshman year in high school, what they taught me was that I needed to further interrogate what the American dream was. And that how can we be talking about the signing of the Declaration of Independence in Philadelphia while black people were being relegated to be 3/5 of a man? The history of black people and Native Americans in this country, I would hope, provide solace and a sense of hope to immigrants in this country who feel excluded. Meaning, black people, Native American people have gone through things that we are going through now, and that actually our fights and our struggles are all interconnected.
So you wrote in your book that after the inauguration of President Trump, you began getting tweets like, pack your bags. That your building manager said he would not be able to hide you if ICE came looking for you. And, Okay, so we haven't seen as many deportations yet during this administration as we saw in the previous one.
Can you repeat that again?
We forget that. We forget that. We saw lots of deportations in the previous administration. Not as many, however, many arrests, and the rhetoric is completely different, as we know, right? It is. And lots of moves to curb illegal immigration. We know the story. But in the meantime, so with this climate, are your bags packed?
Yes.
Okay.
But when he said that, when the building manager said, what are we going to do if ICE can't, if ICE looked for you? And I thought to myself, it's not like I'm hiding. Like, I tweet. I'm on Instagram.
You're everywhere,
I have a
right?
public Facebook page. I'm not in the shadows. I'm like right here. There's like a light. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
so why did he say that? Why did he say
I
that?
don't know.
Okay.
And then it became very real for me that I was trapped, that I had trapped myself. And the writing of the book is, I'd never gotten therapy. So this is like the most therapy I'd allowed myself to get. So I wanted to understand that psyche of being kind of trapped in this place. And the fact is, it is my choice. Because, I can't just leave tomorrow.
That's right.
I can be a writer anywhere. And I'm just going to say this, but to be honest, I think I'm actually pretty talented. And I can be anywhere. I don't need, my talent doesn't, my creativity doesn't need borders or laws to validate it, right? So this is a choice. I am choosing to stay, and I have chosen to stay because I believe that we are definitely better than this. I have chosen to stay because I have built my life around asking questions, and I am now asking, my opinion, the quintessential question in America, which is, how do you define what American is? That is going to be the work of my life, wherever I am. And the book is partly dedicated to the 258 million migrants in the world. According to the UN, there's 258 million migrants in the world, which is the most ever. Like, we are living through the greatest movement of people the world had ever seen. So when you look at the numbers and you actually investigate more, you realize that the great majority of those 258 million people are migrating to countries that previously colonized and imperialized them. That's the story of Indians in the UK, the Senegalese in France. I was in North Carolina, and this man got a little bit belligerent and said, why are there so many of you here? Because I had said that there are 4 million Filipinos that we know of in the United States, including Vanessa Hudgens. People don't know that. Darren Criss, right? So there's 4 million of us, 2 million of whom are in California. And so this man was like, well, why are there so many of you here? And it was pretty late at night, and all I could say to him, because my grandmother raised me politely, so I didn't yell back. And so I said, sir, we are here because you were there. That's why we're here, right? Do you know what happened? The Spanish-American War? And then Rudyard Kipling, the novelist and the poet, wrote a poem called White Man's Burden. The subtitle was The United States and the Philippine Islands. Then it was actually the responsibility, the moral responsibility, and the economic imperative of the United States to take over the Philippines. So wait a second. You can come to our countries, but we can't come to yours. In the book, as you know, I talked about what it was like to be detained in Texas, right? It was only 8 hours. It wasn't that long. But it was fascinating. When they arrest you, they take your shoelaces and your belt because they don't want you hanging yourself. So they separated me from the boy. I was with the boys because there were the girls and then the boys. So I was with the boys, and they were ages 5 to maybe 15, 14. And so many of them really didn't know what was going on, right? And I was a source of such confusion to them because whenever the Border Patrol agent people, because I guess after they arrested me, they realized who they had arrested. So like one of the Border Patrol agent was like, hey, you're all over CNN. Are you famous or something? And I was like, so they would go to the jail cell and they would say, Jose Antonio Vargas. And then the kids would get all excited and they want to talk to me in Spanish. And I'm like, all I know is, ¿Dónde está la biblioteca? Like, right? And my hair was really Asian and poofy, And so one of the boys was like, you could tell that he was like mystified by my hair. And I couldn't really look at their faces because it was too depressing to look at their faces. I didn't want to have to look at them. So I just kept looking at their shoes. And I had just turned 33 and I bought myself these really nice Cole Hand shoes as a birthday gift. And the kids had these really dirty, muddy, because they had walked thousands of miles, right? And they were wearing Nikes, Adidas, and Reeboks. So I thought to myself, wait a second. So Nike, Reebok, and Adidas could go to these countries, like Coke, like Apple, so they could sell us their products. But what do we do with the kids? We had again, let me go back to this. This was 1997 when I found out I was here illegally. We have so bought into the master narrative of what this issue is that we couldn't even see the kids as kids. We locked them up. Now, I thought to myself, man, if these kids had walked from Canada, we would have given them toys. We would have said that it was a humanitarian crisis. We would have said but no, they're just, what the CBS News called them illegal immigrant children. That, by the way, was 4 years ago. And because of Trump, because we think everything is about Trump, now when we cage kids up, all of a sudden, families belong together. Awesome, great. Because, they were families 4 years ago too. Right? So, the hypocrisy of what we're living with, the contradictions, the inherent contradictions, I think require a radical kind of honesty. And against the advice of my own lawyers, and maybe much better for my own mental health, I'm just being as honest as I possibly can and forcing some conversations that people don't want to have, that I've been trying to have with myself for the past 25 years.
If we have time for one more question, there's another conversation that you're pushing right now, just in the last couple of days. Define American is trying to reach out to media organizations as to how they cover immigration. Talk to me about that.
So I know you're going to visit our website, so thank you for doing that. We launched yesterday what we call Sources Matter campaign. So there is this very dangerous thing that people in the news media like myself fall into sometimes, of false equivalencies. So whenever you see an article about immigration, you would read an article and there would be a quote from either three sources: FAIR, Numbers USA, or Center for Immigration Studies. All these groups are actually hate groups, anti-immigrant hate groups, with ties to white nationalism. FAIR was actually founded by a man who said that America should be a majority white country. And yet, when the New York Times or the Washington Post or NPR or CNN or the Los Angeles Times quote them, they don't say any of that. Because news organizations like to want to believe that there are two equal sides to every issue. So there's the anti-immigrant side and there's the for-immigrant side, instead of actually trying to understand what the issue is and why people can't, quote unquote, just get legal. So Define American launched this Sources Matter campaign. And if you have Twitter, I really encourage you to join us. So we're basically challenging news organizations, including the one that I owe my career to, the Washington Post, to be more careful about which sources they cite. I'm not saying, by the way, look, as you can probably tell, I have asked and continue to ask hard questions of myself. And I expect my colleagues in the news media to do the same thing.
So I saw one tweet. So far, one organization had responded and said, well, who's this guy? He lied to get a job, right? So you're getting that kind of pushback.
Of course.
What kind of pushback are you getting from have any of the organizations, the media organizations?
That's what we're pushing through now. It's only the second day. And so we have actually targeted the Washington Post because they have been the most egregious when it comes to this. And I'm really sad to say that, right? Given how necessary the Washington Post is right now, and it should be. We just have to be, and the thing about that is, what gets printed in the Washington Post, in the New York Times, and NPR doesn't just stay in the Washington Post, New York Times, and NPR. It makes its way they set the agenda, and it makes up all across the country. And we are now at a point in which the people who work for those organizations, the three that I named, I call them the holy trinity of anti-immigrant hate, right? The people that work for them now work at the White House. So there's a direct line between these organizations, what Fox News says, and what's in the White House. So why are we not connecting those dots?
So that's just starting. Anything else before I launch into questions? Oh, I want to ask you, the notice to appear, where's that going? Notice to appear means a notice to appear in immigration
when
court.
I got arrested, they gave me a notice to appear, which is kind of like a warrant. I don't know, they haven't filed it yet. The government hasn't filed it yet. So when they file it, then they'll find me.
Okay,
And
so
I'm not hard to find.
you're not hard to find. You're right here. So you got your bags
And at
packed.
every Starbucks you can possibly go to.
Every Starbucks, you got your bags packed. In the meantime, you're sticking around. You're doing what you do.
And
now you're gonna
thankfully,
answer,
Define American is Define American is this organization that we're doing the work no one else is doing, and we have leaders, some of whom are actually here with me, who will continue to work wherever I am. So that's wonderful to me. And they named, this is really crazy, a few months ago, the school district that I attended in California, in Mountain View, where I grew up, they decided to name an elementary school after me, which is crazy. I'm still kind of wrapping my head around that. So I figured whatever happens to me, Jose Antonio Vargas Elementary School and Define American will be here. So, you can holler at me whenever.
So you can find him. You can find him on Twitter.
Yeah.
Okay, and in the meantime, how much time do we have for questions? 10 minutes, okay. So I have a stack of cards here, and the way that it's gone, so the questions were written on index cards. I'm gonna read as many of them as I can, and Jose will answer as many as he can.
As directly and not deflect. Okay.
As directly as he can. So one from Moises. The U.S. will soon become a majority persons of color country. How do you see the political system change in a couple of decades?
Oh wait, simple answer. I think the way Donald Trump gets reelected president is by him taking away birthright citizenship.
It's been talked about before.
He will take it away, and he will say that we should end all illegal and legal migration. He's going to say that we have to take America back. So make America great again is going to evolve into take America back. So meaning, and Donald Trump is not a Republican. Donald Trump is about Donald Trump. So making sure that we don't keep this issue a purely democratic, progressive issue is, to me, incredibly important. I still remember what it was like to hear Dick Cheney in 2004 talk about having a daughter who's a lesbian, and how that opened up a conversation among Republicans about what their role is on now a human rights issue. So for me, making sure that we don't depend on one party on this issue is really important if we're going to actually pass any sort of meaningful reform.
Does that answer the question?
I think it does. Okay.
All right. So somebody writes, Dear Jose, what would you advise undocumented college students who don't have DACA, like myself, in their pursuits or career navigation, especially when they're feeling distraught or downright powerless about their status? And this is just signed from a big fan.
Actually, my colleague Valeria is here. Valeria, can you wave? If you look in the back, so my colleague Valeria, who is very proudly from Nebraska, rural Nebraska, who can't stand LA traffic. I'm sorry, Valeria. She was stuck in traffic for 2 hours today. So Valeria helps lead our chapters program. So there are about 64 Define American chapters across the country in 24 states. So everything we're doing nationally, we're hoping that those chapters are doing locally. I'm really hoping that because of coming here that you all would start a chapter, and I would hope that a place like that could be a place where we can actually discuss mental health issues and provide that kind of space. I cannot overemphasize the importance of knowing that you're not alone. Like, I didn't realize until I wrote this book what depression actually meant to me and what it looked like. I had to actually name it and call it what it is. And by the grace of whoever God is, I just have a really solid group of friends that I know that I can call and I can rely on, and to remind me that I'm never alone. So I think that's the danger, is to think that you're alone. And so making sure that you surround yourself with people that make you see yourself outside of yourself is important. So if you want to start a chapter, please talk to Val.
Here's another good one. Do you think about the what ifs if you had not immigrated, positive or negative?
I try not to because it's too much to think about. I mean, maybe I'll be in the Philippines, and I really wanted to be a filmmaker when I was young, so maybe I would have just made a bunch of films. The thing that I probably, of course, my mom, right? So 25 years. The thing that I think about a lot is my sister. So when I left, she was a year and a half old, and now she's 27, so I haven't seen her. And so I think that's why mentorship is so important to me. I feel like I've collected a group of kind of younger people that I mentor to and I invest in all ways. And I think it's because my sister, I think of my sister and like how I have not been there for her. I mean, I've been there for her. I sent her to college, but that's just money. You know, it's not like when she broke up with her loved one or when she was afraid of my mom, when she, like the normal stuff that you talk to siblings about. So she sent me a note a few months ago saying that she's looking forward to getting to know me, right? Because the only thing she knows me from is Facebook or like, she knows me as the person who sends stuff. She doesn't know me. So that was like, that kind of hurt a lot. I'm realizing, oh my God, I've known this woman since she was born. I was there when she was born. I was in charge of the umbilical cord. I was there. I was in the water, the hot water. And I don't even know her. And I was there when she was born.
That's a hard question to answer. So thanks. For our dreamer students who are thinking of sharing their narrative publicly, what advice would you offer having displayed such courage personally?
Please go to defineamerican.com and we'll talk to you about that. Meaning don't just, especially in this climate, like making sure that you're being careful about who you tell your story to and how much in control you are of that story. I think is really, really important.
And here's a good one. You address this in the book, but what were some of the challenges that you faced as a journalist, being undocumented, yet often having to talk to officials, people in power, etc.? And I would also add the challenge that you face, given that your job is to tell the truth, and yet you've got this secret.
I think a lot of it was the core challenge. I think the guilt around all of that, like how dare I lie to all of my bosses and my employers while I'm supposed to be writing, I'm in a fact-finding, truth-telling profession, and I lied to them about why I'm here. The only way I justified it in the book, it's gonna sound totally delusional, is I thought to myself, I am gonna write stories that no one else can write. Because I also believed, you hear from people that, they're taking somebody else's job. I actually believed that. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna do the kind of journalism that no one else is gonna do, so therefore I'm not taking somebody else's job. But that's totally delusional. Completely, first of all, it's narcissistic. No one can be that, no one can do that, And yet I believed it. I actually believed that I could do stuff that no one else could do.
You brought unique perspective, everybody does.
Everybody does,
does.
but I don't, but I'm not any more special. It's not any more, you know what I'm saying? But I was deluded enough to believe that for 8 years.
So does that answer the question?
I love it. People were like, no, he didn't answer the question.
All right. Jose Antonio, thank you for your bravery and advocacy. What can we do to help pave a path for you to legalization? From Miriam.
Oh, for me?
Yes, for you.
So I have 4 options. A pardon from the president. A private bill. So Kamala Harris or Dianne Feinstein would have to sponsor a bill just to make me a citizen. No. If I had wanted that, I would not have done this. What would have been the point? It would have been like, look, this guy is so special, whatever. Who cares? No. The third option would be you pass immigration reform, whatever that is, and there would be immunity. So all the fraud that I've committed would be excused. The fourth option is leave. So those are the 4 options. Marriage isn't an option, even though it's not like I'm, seeing anybody, but whatever. So that's not really an option because even though I marry somebody, I can't adjust my status because I have committed and admitted to all the fraud. So that's why it's kind of, a bad situation all around.
May I interject a question here, which kind of ties into this one, is given the choices, when you think back on Lolo, your grandfather, who kind of was, the architect of the plan to bring you to the U.S., right? And everybody else who played a part in it, you must have mixed feelings. Can you talk about that?
I was really, again, resentful of it because when I got older, I realized that he could have fixed it if he had talked to a lawyer early enough. if he had talked to a lawyer before I turned 18, there might have been a way for him to adopt me legally. But he didn't do that. And I judged him for that. My grandparents, my grandfather, I think made it through high school, I think. My grandmother through 5th grade. So they weren't educated people in that way. And I so judged them for that. When I was, because you want to prove to your grandparents or your parents that you're smarter than them, right? And so I didn't realize until I think I was in my mid-20s. Thankfully, my grandfather was still alive, so I was still able to apologize to him. That he only knew what he knew. And maybe he had seen too many mobster films. And so he concocted this kind of like Goodfellas kind of plan, and but then how do I not judge him for that? How do I accept the fact that we are only limited by what we know?
We are,
And that he meant well. He meant well.
These are insular circles people learn by word of mouth.
But that's why it's also important to, I think a lot about this, and of course it's from Baldwin. Your crown has been bought and paid for. Your ancestors, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, they already gave it up for you. It's already done. Now you can love yourself. It's possible. So that's why when I think about the moment we're in and I think of like the mental health of people, I just hope that they know that whatever it is they're living through, someone had already paid the price for that. And that it's okay for you to actually claim yourself. Like that's actually okay. And that you don't have to prove yourself to anybody else because that price has been paid for already.
Here's another one. How do you handle pushback?
Oh, you mean from like?
It says, how do you handle defense pushback?
Who asked that question? Can you elaborate? Yeah, yes, sir. So you're going to sign up to our website because in Thanksgiving, we actually have this whole package on the gift of uncomfortable conversations. Especially in time for the holidays. And there's an entire section on just white privilege and whiteness. So I was just in Tulsa, Oklahoma the other night. And this man waited like an hour because it was kind of a long line of people. It was amazing being in Tulsa, actually. And this man who was maybe in his 40s, and he said, the person that I'm hating the most right now is my dad. I just don't understand why he believes what he believes, and I don't know how to talk to him. And you can tell that he was just like, I can talk to strangers, I can call people out on Twitter, he's on Twitter, but my dad, man, he's Italian, I just don't understand, like, why can't he connect? Why can't he understand that this is what his father was, right? And so I was like, sir, we're still preparing the package. It's gonna come. I promise we're gonna provide you that. But I really believe that this is why it's so important right now to really engage white people of all backgrounds. Because I think we are arriving at a moment, when I made White People for MTV, I didn't realize how much criticism I had faced because I don't like reading reviews of anything. Because if I read them, then I have to believe them and then I can't work anymore. So I don't. But one criticism that I read because I was writing the book was that someone from The Atlantic or something wrote an article about how the film I made was White People 101. And that it didn't dig deeper. And of course now I'm like, we are on White People 101. Like that's where we're at. Right? But White People 101 means that white people actually want to learn. And I'm not talking about Ann Coulter and Tucker Carlson and all those really great actors. I'm not talking about them. Give them the Oscars, give them their money, and just let them go. I'm talking about white people who actually want to understand what's happening. So how do we talk to them? Now, thank you for saying that because the burden of that also falls on you, right? You have to confront your own family members. But as people of color, how do we also handle that? How do we not be so quick to cancel people? How do we not be so quick to just, how sometimes we don't really practice active listening? We just want to listen so we can correct people? Because, it feels better. So what does it really mean to practice that? To listen without knowing what the answer could be? Because you're not there to correct them, you're there to actually want to listen to them. So I'm actually doing a follow-up to White People. Right now my working title is Straight White Guys. Ha. I'm just pushing as many little buttons as I can. But I really believe that trying to understand where people are coming from, and I want to understand what it feels like to live as a straight white man in this culture today. I want to understand that.
So we have time for one more question.
Great.
Okay.
And then we're signing books. I hope you want to buy books. Are you going? Okay, great, cool.
This one kind of relates. It's how can I, a young teenage girl, broaden my classmates' knowledge of undocumented immigrants or immigration in general, especially when they know, yet it does not particularly affect them?
Because it does affect them. So one of the reasons why we made white people was the genesis actually was when I was at the University of Georgia in Athens, and I got heckled by the president of the College Republicans. And then I turned the question around on him because, people of color are so used to being asked, where are you from? Where are you from, right? So I like to turn the table around and I'm like, hey, where are you from? He was like, I'm American. I know, but where are you from? I'm white. Well, white is not a country. Where are you from? He didn't know the answer to the question. He didn't know. I was like, what do you mean? Are you Irish? Are you German? Do you know what the Irish people had to do when they got here? You know what the Germans had to do? Do you know all the things they said about, Polish people, the Norwegian? And I was just amazed that he didn't know. And I said, well, can you go find out? Because unless you're a Native American or an African American, you have to answer those are the only two groups who are not immigrants. Native Americans and African Americans, right? Were brought here through slavery. Unless you're two of those groups, you have to answer 3 questions. Where'd you come from? How'd you get here? Who paid? The Philippines smuggled $4,500. If you don't know the answer to those questions, then you don't have any right to obsess over a border that you don't even understand. And that's why for us, with these chapters, we hope, and this is what we're seeing across the country, is that it's becoming a place for white students and black students to talk to students from immigrant backgrounds. So it's bringing people together, which I would argue is the hardest thing to do. It'd be so much easier for us if I said, oh, this is going to be about Filipino people, or this is going to be about Asians, or it's going to be about immigrants, just Latinos. It's a lot harder for us to want to say, well, you know what? When we say American, we actually mean all Americans, right? But it's a hard thing to do. But I would argue, the other thing I want to say is, if you're not feeling slightly uncomfortable when you talk about these issues, then you're not doing the right thing. Like, if you're a little too comfortable, if it's too easy, you're not being effective. This requires uncomfortability. And look, if you want, some perspective, I've been uncomfortable since I was 16. I'm just spreading the uncomfortability. So, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Scripps College. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Excuse me.